Good morning, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Asanov and let's see the top stories. The White House says some Chinese goods face 245% tariffs. China says it will ignore U.S. tariff numbers. A wave of unprecedented attacks is targeting prisons across France. Serbia students and their supporters rallied in the latest anti-government protest. The tariff war between the world's two largest economies is heating up again. The White House has rolled out sweeping new tariffs on Chinese goods, and Beijing is hitting back. Amid the escalating tensions, markets are sliding.
China says it will pay no attention if the US continues playing what it calls a tariff numbers game. Beijing's reaction follows new tax hikes of up to 245% on Chinese goods. President Donald Trump had earlier threatened sweeping tariffs globally, but after backlash, the US rolled back most, keeping the harshest measures for China. Beijing responded by raising its own levies. In a surprise move, China replaced its top trade negotiator, appointing World Trade Organization envoy Li Chenggang to lead future talks. As tensions rise, China is also looking to its neighbors, strengthening ties in Southeast Asia. During a visit to Malaysia, Chinese President Xi Jinping urged Asian nations to unite against global instability.
In the face of shocks to global order and economic globalization, China and Malaysia will stand with countries in the region to combat the undercurrents of geopolitical and camp-based confrontation, overcome the countercurrents of unilateralism and protectionism, and safeguard the promising prospects for development in our shared Asian home.
Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim says the partnership between the two nations is strong.
China has been a rational, strong and reliable partner. Malaysia values this consistency. Malaysia will remain an unwavering and principled friend to China, guided by the wisdom of history and the promise of the future. Our foreign policy is shaped by a clear-eyed vision of our interests.
Meanwhile, the economic fallout is hitting global markets. US stocks dropped sharply. The S&P 500 fell more than 120 points. The Nasdaq lost more than 500, and the Dow slid nearly 700 points. Nvidia warned of a potential $5.5 billion loss after new US export curbs on its artificial intelligence chips, a major market in China. Its shares, along with other semiconductor stocks, plunged.
We think you're going to continue to see tech on the downdraft just because a lot of this tariff noise is going to affect them specifically, because now we're focused on China. Before, when it was a worldwide tariff issue, there's a lot of companies that had some kind of skin in the game, if you will. With China, a lot of it's tech. And so I think a lot of the tech money is going to be pulling out, going to other places.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warns that bigger tariffs could raise inflation and slow growth.
Some people believe the Fed will intervene if the stock market plummets, the so-called Fed put. Are they correct?
I'm going to say no with an explanation. So what I think is going on in markets is markets are processing what's going on. And, it's really the policies, particularly the trade policy. And really the question is, where's that going to come in? Where's that going to land? And we don't know that yet. And until we know that, you can't really make informed assessments that would still be highly uncertain. Once you know what the policies are, it'll still be highly uncertain what the economic effects will be. So markets are struggling with a lot of uncertainty, and that means volatility.
As the trade war intensifies, Washington and Beijing are recalibrating, with the global economy caught in the middle.
Amid the US-China trade war, the World Trade Organization has revised its 2025 forecast. It now predicts a sharp decline in global trade, the steepest drop since the pandemic.
The World Trade Organization has sharply downgraded its forecast for global trade, warning of the steepest decline in merchandise trade since the pandemic. In its latest annual trade outlook, the WTO now expects global goods trade to shrink by 0.2% in 2025, a dramatic shift from the 3.0% growth it had projected just 6 months ago. The downgrade follows rising trade tensions as the US and China remain engaged in escalating trade war. According to the WTO, if the US proceeds with a full reinstatement of its earlier broad tariffs, global goods trade could fall by as much as 1.5%.
A reinstatement of reciprocal tariffs would shave 0.6 percentage points off this forecast, lowering the projected growth rate to minus 0.8%. This is almost the 1 percentage point contraction we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Now, a broader spread of policy uncertainty beyond U.S. trading relationships would reduce growth by another 0.7 percentage points, implying a total decline in global merchandise trade of 1.5 percentage points in 2025 if both downside risks materialize.
Such a downturn would mark the most severe slump in trade since the height of the COVID-19 crisis in 2020.
Services trade, while not directly subject to tariffs, is also expected to be adversely affected. Declines in goods trade will reduce demand for related services such as transport and logistics, while broader economic uncertainty is expected to dampen demand for travel and investment-related services. As a result, the volume of global services trade, and I should stress it's the volume, not the value, is now forecast to grow by 4.0% in 2025 and 4.1% in 2026, well below the baseline projections of 5.1% and 4.8% without the tariff changes.
The organization warned that continued protectionism and uncertainty could have severe negative consequences for the global economy if current trends persist.
Earlier, my colleague Andy Mioch spoke to the director of Active Trades, a UK-based brokerage firm, about the complexities of Donald Trump's tariffs. He asked Ricardo Evangelista how the constant decision-changing of levies has affected global markets.
What do you make of the blowback Trump's back and forth with tariffs and a full-on trade war with China brought upon his own economy and the U.S. markets?
Hello, good evening. Yes, I think the markets got it slightly wrong with Donald Trump. Before the beginning of his second mandate, most were expecting Donald Trump to deliver tax cuts, to deliver deregulation, and perhaps a little bit of tariffs as well. In the end, what happened was that Donald Trump's approach to deploying his tariffs policy was totally unexpected and caused chaos. As we know, going backwards and forwards with policies and measures that can have a strong impact on not just the American economy, but on the entire global economic ecosystem is not good, because what the markets like to see is stability and being able to predict what's going to happen. Donald Trump flipped everything on its head, and this is why we are seeing this lack of trust reflected in massive losses in US stocks, depreciation of the US dollar, treasury yields rising, and then safe haven assets like gold or the Swiss franc benefiting from the flows of assets from US to safety.
In Ukraine, a drone attack has hit the city of Dnipro during a mass assault on Wednesday evening. 3 people were killed and dozens were injured, including 3 young children, one of which was a 9-month-old baby. At least 28 people were wounded and 5 remain in hospital, according to local authorities, who say one of the drone strikes landed just 100 meters from the city's municipal offices. American troops have quietly stood guard over Europe since World War II. But quiet doesn't mean permanent. We examine the future of the West network of US bases across the continent and ask, is Europe ready if its most powerful ally steps away?
What if the umbrella falls? For decades, Europe relied on the presence of US troops, an archipelago of American bases stretching from the Arctic to the Black Sea.
No contact forward about 4 miles.
But now, with Washington signaling possible cuts, Europe faces a sobering question. Did it outsource its own defense too long? The US military operates a sprawling network of over 50 installations across Europe, each strategically placed, each playing a role that extends far beyond the continent itself. At the core of this structure are the air bases. Ramstein Air Base, Germany, the largest American community overseas, controls drone operations and supports missions across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. RAF, Lakenheath, UK, home to the 48th Fighter Wing, has flown combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. RAF Mildenhall, UK, supports air refueling across the entire theatre. Aviano, Italy, hosts the only US fighter wing south of the Alps, with rapid deployment facilities for airborne troops. Incirlik, Turkey, is central to operations over the Middle East and against terrorism, though its use depends on Ankara's approval. Mihail Kogalnicianu, Romania, is undergoing a $2.7 billion expansion to become NATO's largest European facility by 2030. On the seas, the US Navy operates from several critical naval installations. NSA, Naples, Italy, is home to the US Sixth Fleet and commands maritime strategy across Europe and Africa. Naval Station Rota, Spain, hosts 4 Aegis-equipped destroyers for missile defense. NSA Souda Bay, Greece, offers the only pier in the Med capable of docking nuclear carriers. On land, the US maintains robust army garrisons. USAG Vicenza, Italy, houses the 173-round Airborne Brigade, ready for deployment to crises from Africa to the Middle East. USAG Stuttgart, Germany, is the nerve center for US operations in 51 countries, home to Special Ops Command Europe. And as missile threats evolve, so too has the US response. NSF Redzikowo, Poland, and NSF de Vesela, Romania, hosts Aegis ashore systems targeting missile risks from the Middle East. RAF Flyingdales, UK, provides early warning and space surveillance. RAF Menwith Hill, UK, serves as a global intelligence gathering hub, tapping into satellite communications and drone targeting. Pitofik Space Base, Greenland, the northernmost US outpost, track missile launch and space threats and hosts 150 personnel. The Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, Germany, meanwhile remains the largest overseas American hospital, treating over 205,000 US and Allied personnel annually. In total, around 84,000 US personnel are stationed across this system. They operate in permanent, strategically located facilities, forming a grid of global surveillance, missile defense, logistics, and rapid response capability. But all this is now at risk. On April 8, General Christopher Cavalli called Europe the first line of defense of our homeland. Just 1 day later, reports emerge of US troops cuts, starting with logistic personnel withdrawn from Jasionka, Poland. As many as 10,000 troops may soon leave from Poland and Romania. Retired US commanders are sounding alarms. Admiral James Fogo warns of a shift from global to regional power. Lieutenant General Ben Hodge says Russia would view it as abandonment. Lieutenant General Stephen Twitty fears it erases US strategic depth. But the greater worry may be this: Europe built little of its own. Despite a 30% increase in EU defense spending since 2021, the total still hovers around 1.9% of GDP, below NATO's 2% targets. Europe's planned rapid deployment capacity fields just 5,000 troops, and the European Defence Fund remains modest at 7.3 billion euros. Fragmentation, underinvestment, and a habit of relying on the American shield now raise a final question. What if the umbrella falls? The US system may shrink, but unless Europe fills that space, what comes next may not be a gap, it may be a vacuum.
A wave of unprecedented attacks is targeting prisons across France. At least a dozen facilities and related institutions have been hit in recent days, prompting a strong response from the government officials. President Emmanuel Macron has vowed that those responsible will be, quote, found, tried and punished, as authorities consider both organized crime and militant activism among possible culprits.
3 cars were torched at a prison in southern France, according to the country's National Anti-Terrorism Prosecutor's Office, or PNAT, in what officials are calling part of a disturbing escalation. A separate car was also set alight outside the home of a prison guard in Aix-Luynes. In the Seine-et-Marne region, the door of a building was seriously damaged in another incident. These latest acts bring the total to at least 9 prison facilities and affiliated institutions targeted in recent days, including a school for training prison staff. President Emmanuel Macron addressed the attacks on social media, posting on X. Those behind the attacks will be found, tried and punished. Authorities suspect drug trafficking networks may be involved, but Justice Minister Gérald Darmanin says other angles are also under investigation. Speaking on France's CNews channel, Darmanin labelled the violence as terrorism. Graffiti bearing the letters DDPF, believed to stand for French Prisoners' Rights, was seen at several of the sites. Some police sources suggest the involvement of unidentified left-wing militant groups. Investigators are now looking into a Telegram group called DDPF, created just 1 day before the first attacks. Posts from the channel read, "This channel is a movement dedicated to denouncing the violations of our fundamental rights. All prisoners in France must mobilise and wake up." According to Le Parisien, one man suspected of being linked to the group has been arrested, though his exact role remains unclear. Both PNAT and the local prosecutor's office have so far declined to comment.
Hundreds of anti-government protesters filled the square in the city of Kraljevo in central Serbia. The demonstration was organized and led by students. They are demanding that those responsible for the roof collapse at a train station in Novi Sad last November be brought to justice. It's after the incident killed more than a dozen people. Early on Wednesday, Serbia's parliament approved Professor Đuro Mačud as prime minister. It's after a month of anti-corruption protests that led his predecessor to resign. Georgia's President Mikhail Kavelashvili met with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev on Wednesday. From energy exports to transport links, the two leaders stressed the role both countries play in Europe's energy security and the future of the South Caucasus. Our Orkan Amashov has more.
On his first official foreign trip, Georgian President Mikhail Kavelashvili is here in Baku. He arrived yesterday and today he held one-on-one meeting with his Azerbaijani counterpart, President Ilham Aliyev. Just a few moments ago, both leaders were here addressing the media representative. That was a press briefing, not a classical press conference. The importance of the fact that this is Georgian President's first foreign trip has been re-emphasized on a number of occasions by both leaders as a moment testifying to the growing significance of strategic relations between these two Caucasian nations. Both leaders talked about connectivity as an essential element. President Aliyev talked about Georgia and Azerbaijan having built this network based on transport, energy lines in this region and the necessity of foreign actors taking this into account. He said that effectively in this region, Azerbaijan and Georgia are building and have been building for some considerable time that essential infrastructure for the middle corridor. And therefore the importance of these two countries and the relationship between them, of course, go beyond the scope of this region.
Azərbaycan və Gürcüstan birgə həyata keçirdiyi neft-qaz.
As I mentioned, many investment projects that unite us are of great importance for a wider geography. The oil and gas projects, the oil and gas pipelines, and the transport and communication initiatives jointly implemented by Azerbaijan and Georgia are truly of great significance. These projects have not only reshaped the transportation and energy map of the South Caucasus, but also that of the entire Eurasian region. If we are talking about the energy security of Europe today, it is impossible to imagine it without Azerbaijan and Georgia. Currently, Azerbaijan exports natural gas to 12 countries, including Georgia, and these exports are carried out through Georgia.
İxrac edir və bu ixrac Gürcüstan vasitəsilə həyata keçirilir.
And Georgian president also mentioned about this connectivity agenda. When Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kabakhidze was here just 2 months ago, back then the focus was fundamentally on figures, on trade, and being perhaps more detailed on that front. But on this occasion, leaders were fundamentally focusing on political dialogue element of the bilateral relations. Georgian president talked extensively about the self-sufficiency, national pride, necessity of deciding on one's national affairs without waiting for somebody, for some third party, actually taking actions on your behalf, about the preservation of national values, with these elements being seen as key sensibilities dominating today's meeting. Of course, Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process has also been touched upon, and Georgian president described this as a very important moment in terms of, without using the term House of Caucasus, but creating this structure within this region.
I am sure that our common future involves a successful, economically strong and prosperous South Caucasus, where our peoples will be able to live together in accordance with their own customs and traditions, rather than under so-called liberal values. Unfortunately, our countries have been repeatedly subjected to double standards and interference in internal affairs by foreign forces in recent years. Despite the numerous efforts, we are resolutely eliminating these threats, ensuring the security and stability of the region. No third country or organization can know better than us what is best for our peoples. I am glad that cooperation between Azerbaijan and Georgia in the protection of common interests has been stepped up. And Mr. President, I would like to thank you again for that.
Ultimately, both leaders have been focusing on this self-sufficiency, necessity of taking actions today for the greater good of the region. And Georgian president also invited Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev to Georgia, emphasizing the importance and growing significance of the bilateral relations between these two countries.
A planned EU military aid package to Armenia has stirred tensions as Hungary pushes for equal treatment of Azerbaijan.
Hungary has blocked a €10 million military aid package intended for Armenia under the European Peace Facility, EPF. The aid, composed of non-lethal military assistance, was aimed at equipping a battalion-level field camp in Armenia. The EPF, launched in 2021, is the European Union's primary tool for financing military support outside the bloc. While most of its funds have so far gone to Ukraine, the 2024 package marks the first instance of the EU extending EPF military aid to Armenia and Azerbaijan. However, Hungary has withheld its approval for 6 weeks, reportedly demanding that Azerbaijan be included in the discussions and receive a matching aid package. According to diplomatic sources, Budapest insisted that Baku be granted €10 million in support for demining operations as a precondition for lifting its veto. Efforts to resolve the deadlock continued as recently as Monday, but sources said that negotiations failed to produce a breakthrough. Hungary's stance reflects its close ties with Azerbaijan and its push for a more balanced EU approach in the South Caucasus region.
Pakistani and Afghan officials have met for talks amid tensions. Our Tamim Bahi says more.
Pakistani and Afghan officials are holding a series of meetings amid rising tensions and emerging opportunities. These discussions come as a Taliban spokesperson rejected a recent Washington Post report alleging that the American weapons left behind in Afghanistan have ended up in the hands of armed groups and are now being used against the Pakistani government. The spokesperson claimed that the American weapons left behind in Afghanistan during the past 2 decades of war were already circulating on the black market. He added that the equipment left behind by US forces is securely stored in government depots. Meanwhile, Pakistan continues to forcibly deport hundreds of thousands of Afghan refugees. Reports indicate that many refugees are being detained prior to deportation, with some having their belongings confiscated. In response, Afghan officials have repeatedly urged Pakistan to ensure the safe and dignified return of Afghan refugees. At the same time, Pakistan's Special Representative for Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq Khan, has arrived in Kabul to attend the second round of the Pakistan-Afghanistan Joint Coordination Committee, a mechanism aimed at resolving border disputes and improving bilateral coordination, which has been stalled since January 2024. Additionally, Afghanistan's Ministry of Industry and Commerce has announced that a high-level delegation comprising officials from various ministries will visit Pakistan to address key issues related to trade, transportation, transit, and the challenges faced by Afghan refugees living in Pakistan. These developments highlight the complex and often tense dynamics between Afghanistan and Pakistan, underscoring both the challenges and opportunities for renewed cooperation. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Kazakhstan's Astana is hosting the second Central Asian Media Forum, bringing together leading industry voices from Europe to East Asia. Fariza Kalimurzuna reports from the event.
This is the second Central Asian Media Forum since 2022. As global attention increasingly shifts towards Central Asia, the way information is shared has never been more important. Today's forum brings together key players of the media industry, the people who report the news, shoot stories, and shape public discourse.
Key topics this year include digitalization, influence of social media, and new models for international collaboration. Many experts agree on the crucial value of the younger audience for the modern media, and that the media strategies, content, and its delivery should aim specifically for this target group.
Yes, younger audience are our main target group because, of course, media always tends to be a young form of communication. And so for Euronews, it's a very, very big part of our innovation strategy to ask ourselves and give the answers how we can reach young people. And so all social media activities are in the core of our innovation process.
It is really difficult to imagine the world without the social media today, particularly for the youth, for the Generation Z and for the Generation Alpha. This is where they were born using this technology, so it's really natural for them to use this. But on the other hand, how they digest media, what they read, what they see is rapidly changing. Most of them are becoming really tired of advertisements of bloggers and influencers, and we see a certain decline of a trust to a bloggers industry.
The event signals the region's rising role in shaping the future of journalism. The forum has become a major platform for dialogue on the future of media in Central Asia.
Well, first, Uzbekistan is an integral part of Central Asia. We have bilateral and multilateral cooperation with the countries of Central Asia. We have established MOUs with Kazakhstan, with Azerbaijan. We're also planning to sign the roadmaps with Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. So that's why it's very important, but also important to gain some information, knowledge, know-how how to create content, how to moderate content.
As Central Asia works to strengthen its media identity and build new bridges of cooperation, the forum highlights a region not only adapting to global trends, but aiming to shape them.
In the heart of Turkey's stunning Mediterranean coastline, an ancient piece of history has been brought back to life. After lying buried for centuries, a Roman Patara lighthouse, commissioned nearly 2,000 years ago, has been meticulously reconstructed and is now set to shine once again. In the ancient city of Patara, nestled along Turkey's southern coast in Antalya's Kaş district, a beacon from the Roman world has risen once more. The 2,000-year-old lighthouse, originally commissioned by Emperor Nero in AD 64 or 65, once stood 30 meters tall, guiding ships across the Mediterranean. But in 1481, the Rhodes earthquake triggered a devastating tsunami that swept through the harbor, toppling the lighthouse and burying it beneath the sands. Forgotten for centuries, it remained hidden beneath shifting dunes until its dramatic rediscovery. Systematic excavations began in 2004, uncovering some 2,500 stones that once formed the towering structure. By the next year, the painstaking process of reassembling it began, piece by piece, like a massive stone jigsaw puzzle. Led by Professor Hava İskan Işık, the team digitally modeled the lighthouse and created replicas of the damaged or missing pieces. Their work led to a reconstruction, one that includes only 8% of new stones, rising to 18% in the upper section where the collapse had caused the most damage. Şevket Aktaş, director of the Patara Ancient City excavations, says the final touches are being completed before the lighthouse opens to the public.
Ufak tefek eksiklikler dışında yapı tümüyle ayağa kalkmış durumda.
There are minor deficiencies. The lighthouse will start to welcome visitors once the stairs, doors, and landscaping leading to the podium are completed. The lighthouse will be symbolically lit centuries later. This structure, which has come down to the present day from the ancient world and represents Emperor Nero, is a very special structure with both its monumental podium and architecture. The lighthouse has a tower made of 2,500 stones on a monumental podium. It is a lighthouse that everyone would want to see.
With the final details nearly complete and a symbolic lighting ceremony on the horizon, the ancient Roman lighthouse is ready to shine once more, an enduring tribute to maritime history and ancient engineering that's sure to draw visitors from around the globe. We're done for now, but don't go far. Stay tuned for more updates and have a wonderful morning.
Welcome to Oikaraga.
Love you. Bye.
This is the place to be when the night ski starts. If you
wanted to show visitors this place, to show these views of Ilia Alatau National Park, and succeed, and we did it.
Welcome to NewsHour. The conflict in Gaza rumbles on, with diplomatic momentum proving elusive. Despite relentless shuttle diplomacy by regional and global actors, the two sides remain deeply at odds. The conditions for even a temporary pause in fighting remain hotly contested. Well, off the battlefield, the humanitarian toll is worsening. Aid groups report critical shortages, tens of thousands displaced, and infrastructure devastated. The UN has sounded the alarm, urging immediate access to those in need. In capitals around the world, unease is mounting. European leaders call for restraint, while the US continues quiet diplomacy to restore calm. Yet with little political will on display, hopes for a breakthrough continue to fade. Exhaustion grips both populations, and now a recent proposal briefly raised the hopes of a turning point, only to underline how entrenched the positions remain.
A fresh attempt by Israel to bring about a temporary halt to fighting in Gaza has fallen through. It's after Hamas rejected a 6-week ceasefire proposal delivered via mediators in Cairo and Doha. The development marks yet another breakdown in efforts to end a war that has now entered its 7th month with no sign of resolution. The Israeli proposal reportedly centred on a phased plan for a 6-week pause in hostilities.